For 300 cycles, the Dominion Registry had stamped the world Chiron with a single verdict. Category E, violent, unstable, not worth conquering, barely worth watching. To the galaxy, the Chironites were loud mammals who had only recently learned how to fold space. Their ships were small. Their politics were messy. Their broadcasts were mostly music, arguments, and prayers fired into the dark. So Commander Vale Rask of the Zilun Patrol Line took the assignment as a punishment posting. Babysit an ignored sector, chase smugglers, file reports no one read. Then the void shivered. Not an explosion, not a jump signature, not any known weapon. A sound, a low harmonic that crawled through hyperspace like a pulse in bone. It hit 12 systems at once and made navigation beacons stutter. It made star maps briefly display wrong constellations, as if reality blinked. Rask stared at the spectrum readout as his bridge lights dimmed. His sensor officer whispered, "That pattern, it's layered. Like an old anthem. Like code wearing a song." Rask leaned closer. The translation engine tried to label it and failed, then spat one phrase in a dead protocol the registry claimed didn't exist. Hushlaw / wake condition met. His throat tightened. Source. The answer came back instantly, and it was impossible. Beneath Chiron's southern ocean. Deep. Far deeper than any city could survive. Under pressure that would crush modern hulls like foil. The Dominion Council demanded explanations within hours. Fleets rotated toward the sector. Diplomats screamed for inspections. Religious orders declared omens. War admirals called it bait. Chiron's envoy, Mara Ives, met the emergency assembly with a calm face and empty hands. "We don't know what you're talking about," she said, and her voice was almost bored. They would have called it a lie until the second pulse arrived. This time, the ocean opened. A circular structure rose through black water like a stone halo, shedding centuries of silt. It didn't rust. It didn't creak. It didn't look built by any known species. And behind it, just for a moment, scanners caught silhouettes that made the council chamber go silent. 9 dormant warships, each the size of a moon, sleeping under Chiron like buried gods. Rask watched the feed and felt something he hadn't felt since his first battle. Not fear of Chiron. Fear of what Chiron had been hiding from itself. Because the signal didn't say hello. It said, "Returning home." Commander Vale Rask had spent 11 patrol cycles watching an empty stretch of space nobody cared about. The Dominion called it outer quiet. The crews called it a graveyard, wide lanes of black, slow trade ships, and the occasional scavenger drone that tried to strip dead satellites for metal. He knew every standard anomaly. Solar flares that tricked sensors, micrometeor storms that scraped shields, smugglers who hid heat signatures behind asteroids. What hit his ship was none of that. The Zilun Patrol Cruiser Kestrel line jolted, as if something massive had brushed its hull. The bridge lights dimmed, surged, then steadied. A low vibration rolled through the deck plating, soft at first, then deeper, as if the ship itself had developed a heartbeat. Rask gripped the edge of his command console. Report. His sensor officer, Lieutenant Sarek Pell, blinked rapidly, eyes locked on the spectrum wall. Hyperspace ripple. Not a jump. Not a burst. It's a harmonic. A harmonic doesn't do this, Rask said. His voice stayed flat, but his spine tightened. The vibration made the air feel thicker. Sarek dragged a waveform into focus, layering it against known signatures. The engine database flashed 100 error flags. The pattern didn't match any FTL wake. It didn't match any weapon discharge. It didn't match any natural phenomenon the Dominion had cataloged. And yet it was clean, deliberate, repeated, like a message. "Play it," Rask ordered. The bridge speakers emitted a sound, so low it was almost felt more than heard. It wasn't music exactly. It was too precise, too structured. A pulse inside a pulse, with subpatterns woven like threads through a rope. Sarek swallowed. "It's coded." The translation engine tried to run its usual analysis. For a full second it returned nothing. Then it spat out a warning in dead text. Unclassified protocol. Unknown origin Hushlaw / wake condition met. Rask's jaw tightened. Hushlaw. He had never seen those words in any Dominion system. Source. Sarek hesitated, then cursed softly. Planet side. Rask turned slowly toward the planet display, the blue sphere sitting harmlessly in the center of their map. Chiron. Category E. Primitive and unstable. A world the Dominion watched mostly out of habit, like one watches a campfire to make sure it doesn't become a forest blaze. The source indicator pulsed red, not from the surface, not from orbit, but from beneath the Southern Ocean. Deep. Buried. That's impossible, Sarek muttered. There's nothing down there but rock, water, and pressure. Rast didn't answer. He watched the signal line, watched it repeat at perfect intervals. It didn't feel like a cry for help. It didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a clock. Open a tight beam to Dominion Relay, Rask said. Emergency priority. Sarek's fingers flew over the console. Sending now. The bridge crew fell quiet as the message shot into the dark. Rask stared at the planet again, trying to fit what he was seeing into what he knew. Category E worlds didn't produce harmonics that made hyperspace shiver. Category E worlds didn't wake dead protocols. Category E worlds didn't broadcast something called hush law. Within hours, the quiet sector wasn't quiet anymore. First came the probes, fast, silent drones launched from ships that didn't want to approach too close. Then came the listening arrays. Then, as the Dominion Council realized the signal wasn't fading, came the fleets. Rask watched the tactical display fill with new icons. Bright, sharp signatures. Heavy cruisers. Diplomatic carriers. War frigates from 3 different allied blocks. They all arrived with the same excuse. Observation. Rask had served long enough to know what observation meant when weapon systems were charged and the ships formed a loose ring. It meant fear. And fear meant someone was going to make a mistake. A Dominion transmission pinged on his console. Council directive. Maintain sector control. All traffic logged. No unauthorized contact. Then, a second line. Earth-like world Chiron. Diplomatic channel opened. The image on Rask's main holo formed into a tall human woman in a plain dark suit. Her hair was pulled back tightly. Her expression was calm in a way that felt practiced. Commander Vale Rask, she said, pronouncing his name almost perfectly. I am Ambassador Mara Ives, Unified Chiron Delegation. We request clarification on the sudden escalation of Dominion presence. Rask didn't blink. A hyperspace harmonic originated beneath your Southern Ocean. We are investigating. Mara's face didn't change. We have no knowledge of such a signal. That signal is repeating every 7 minutes, Rask said. Our systems label it an unknown protocol. Mara's eyes stayed steady. Chiron has no military installations in the Southern Ocean. Rask leaned slightly forward. Then you should be just as concerned as we are. For the first time, something flickered behind Mara's calm. So small it could have been imagination. A tightening at the corner of her mouth. A fraction of hesitation. Then she gave a controlled nod. We will cooperate within reasonable sovereignty boundaries. No boarding rights. No surface incursion. Rask's lip curled faintly. Sovereignty is an interesting word for a Category E world. Mara didn't react like someone insulted. She reacted like someone hearing a familiar tool being used. That label is yours, she said simply. Not ours. The channel ended with polite formality, but the chill remained. Rask stood for a long moment after the holo faded, listening to the low vibration that still seemed to cling to the ship's bones. The signal was still there, pulsing under everything. Waiting. On the second day, the Dominion Council convened an emergency session so urgent it pulled representatives out of active wars to attend. Rask wasn't in the chamber, but he received the feed. He watched as alien faces argued and postured, each trying to control their fear by turning it into demands. What is hidden beneath Chiron? One delegate demanded. Perhaps the humans stole something, another hissed. A trap, a third insisted. They're primitive, but they are clever in deception. When Mara Ives appeared on the council stage, she wore the same plain suit, the same calm face, as if the galaxy's panic was just bad weather. We have no active weapons platform beneath our ocean, she said, voice steady. We do not know the source. Chiron requests restraint. A tentacled chancellor slammed a limb against the council table. Restraint? Your world has just broadcast a pre-imperial protocol that no one recognizes. You expect restraint. Mara tilted her head slightly. We expect reason. The council devolved into threats within minutes. Sanctions. Quarantine. Forced inspection. For the safety of the Grand Order, they said, as if safety could be maintained by pointing guns at a planet. Then the harmonic changed. It didn't stop. It didn't intensify. It shifted, like the signal had heard them. Rast's bridge alarms flared. Not weapon alarms. Not collision alarms. Deep spectrum anomaly alarms. Sarek's voice came sharp. Commander, new output from the source. It's opening something. Rask spun toward the planet display. The Southern Ocean marker expanded. Sensor overlays stacked. The water itself appeared to bulge upward in a slow, impossible dome. It wasn't a wave. It was too smooth, too controlled. Then the ocean parted. Not violently, not with spray and chaos, but with a clean circular motion, as if the sea had become a curtain pulled aside by unseen hands. A structure rose from beneath the Mariana Basin, an enormous ring, dark and matte, swallowing sunlight rather than reflecting it. It emerged with the patience of something that had waited longer than any living memory. Rask's breath caught despite himself. The ring wasn't metal like Dominion alloys. It had no seams, no rivets, no visible joints. Its surface carried faint lines that glowed for a heartbeat, then faded, like scars remembering heat. Sarek whispered, "That's not corrosion. That's activation." Every fleet around Chiron shifted position. Weapons came online. Targeting locks flashed and vanished as commanders argued about what to aim at and what to fear most. Mara Ives' voice cut through on an emergency channel, uninvited, but somehow granted access. "Do not fire," she said. "No panic. No pleading. Just a statement." Rask snapped. "Ambassador, explain what that is." There was a pause, 2 seconds too long. Then Mara answered, and for the first time her calm sounded tired. "It's not supposed to be awake." The ring continued to rise until it hovered above the parted sea like a halo over a wound. Beneath it, the water churned in slow spirals, held back by invisible fields. Rast's sensors suddenly screamed with new mass readings. Not 1, not 2, 9. Large objects, deeply buried, shifting as if a giant had stirred beneath the planet's skin. Sarek's hands shook as he pulled the measurements onto the main screen. Mass signatures are impossible. Each one is the size of a small moon, Rask finished, voice tight. The council feed erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted. Admirals barked orders. Someone screamed, "Planet-class weapons," and half the fleet immediately tried to reposition to flee. But the ring didn't fire. It didn't attack. It simply broadcast again. This time the translation engine didn't struggle. I didn't guess. It was recognized. A single line appeared across every bridge, every station, every council display. Returning home. Commander Rask felt the hair along his arms rise. Because the signal wasn't addressed to the Dominion. It wasn't addressed to the Council. It was addressed to Chiron. And whatever was beneath that ocean, whatever those sleeping masses were, it had just been told the wait was over. Rask leaned toward his comms. "All ships," he ordered, voice low and hard. "Hold fire. Hold position. And someone get me Mara Ives back on a live channel." Sarek looked up, pale. "Commander." "What?" Sarek pointed at the deep scan feed. A new indicator had appeared beneath the largest mass signature. Not a weapon status. Not a reactor reading. A label. Ancient. Auto-generated from the same dead protocol. Primary unit. Oath of Thundersnow status. Waking. Rask swallowed. Because the galaxy hadn't just found an old machine. It had found something that had a name. And names meant purpose. And purpose meant history. And history, buried, erased, and now rising, was about to break the Grand Order in half. The Dominion fleets held position for exactly 43 minutes. That was how long discipline lasted when fear had no clear target. Commander Vale Rask watched the tactical display as ship formations drifted out of perfect alignment, captains edging their vessels backward by fractions, pretending it was for sensor optimization or defensive spacing. No one wanted to be the closest ship if the thing beneath Chiron decided to finish waking. The ring above the ocean remained still. It did not rotate. It did not glow. It did not acknowledge the hundreds of weapons now aimed in its direction. It simply existed. Rask opened a direct channel to the planet again. "Ambassador Ives, you said it wasn't supposed to be awake. Start explaining." The hologram snapped to life almost immediately, as if she had been waiting. Mara Ives stood alone this time. No aides. No flags. No background. Just a bare room and a human who looked older than she had an hour ago. "There are things on Chiron," she said carefully, "that our governments don't fully control." Rask snorted. You buried 9 moon-mass objects under your planet and forgot about them. Mara didn't rise to the bait. We buried nothing. Then who did? For the first time since the crisis began, Mara hesitated openly. People who no longer exist, she said. Rask felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had heard that phrase before, usually from species talking about extinct rivals or forgotten precursor myths, not from a so-called primitive world. You're telling me your ancestors built that? Rask asked. I'm telling you, Mara replied, that Chiron's history is not as simple as your registries claim. Before Rask could press further, Sarek cut in sharply. Commander, planetary transmission spike. Multiple internal channels just went active. Military-grade encryption. From where? From everywhere, Sarek said. It's like old systems are waking up. Rask glanced back at Mara. Her expression had gone tight, controlled in a way that screamed containment breach. You have hidden command structures, Rask said flatly. Yes, Mara answered. And they are older than our modern nations. On Chiron's surface, the world was discovering that truth the hard way. In New Carthage, a coastal megacity thousands of kilometers from the rising ring, commuters froze as emergency alerts hijacked every screen, billboard, and personal device. Not the usual weather warnings or civil defense messages. This alert carried a symbol no one recognized. A broken circle bisected by a single vertical line. The same symbol flashed across rural towns, orbital stations, and underground transit hubs. It bypassed civilian networks entirely, tapping into infrastructure layers most engineers didn't know still existed. And with it came a message. Quiet custodian protocol. Active report to assigned sites. Do not panic, do not interfere. General Lena Cade was in the middle of a routine briefing when the alert cut through her secure military channel. Her aides froze as the symbol appeared on the wall display. One of them whispered, "Ma'am, that clearance layer doesn't exist anymore." Lena stared at the symbol, something tugging at the back of her memory. Not recognition. Something deeper. Like déjà vu without context. Her personal comm chimed once. Then again. A private channel. No source ID. She accepted it. General Cade. A voice said, male, old, calm in a way that felt carved from stone. If you are seeing the sigil, your presence is required. Who is this? Lena demanded. Someone who has waited a long time. The voice replied. Proceed to Vault 17. Coordinates attached. Come alone. The channel closed. Lena exhaled slowly. She should have reported this. Should have escalated to the Unified Command. Instead, she grabbed her coat and left without explanation. Vault 17 lay beneath a stretch of desert that had never made sense geologically. Too stable, too symmetrical, too quiet. Lena descended through layers of security she didn't remember authorizing. Doors opened to her biometrics without challenge. Ancient scanners hummed as if pleased to see her. At the bottom, she entered a circular chamber lined with black stone and dormant consoles older than any interface she had trained on. A single man stood at the center. He was thin, gray-haired, and wore no insignia. His clothes were simple. His eyes were sharp. You came, he said. You knew I would. Lena asked. Yes. Who are you? The man inclined his head slightly. I am Elias Morn, last active custodian of the quiet. Lena frowned. That's not a real office. Elias smiled faintly. It hasn't been for a very long time. Around them, lights flickered to life, illuminating walls covered in glyphs. Not alien, but not modern Chironite either. The shapes felt familiar in a way she couldn't explain. What is this place? She asked. A memory, Elias said. And a safeguard. Lena's jaw tightened. There are Dominion fleets in orbit and something the size of a moon walking under our ocean. If this is a joke, it is a failure, Elias interrupted softly. Ours. He gestured, and a hologram bloomed between them. The ring above the Southern Ocean, the 9 buried masses beneath. You are looking at the last sleepers, he said. And the reason Chiron survived long enough to forget itself. Lena stared. Forget what? That we were never alone, Elias replied. And that once, we were never small. Back in orbit, Commander Rask received a partial data leak from one of the Dominion science vessels. The readings were incomplete, corrupted by interference from the ring, but what remained made his blood run cold. These aren't just ships, Sarek said quietly. Their internal volume is layered. Modular. Like they were built to adapt. To what? Rask asked. Sarek shook his head. I don't know, but they're not just weapons platforms. Rask leaned back, eyes fixed on the planet. Then what are they? Before Sarek could answer, a new transmission cut through. This one not from Chiron's government, but from the ring itself. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a handshake. Rask's systems hesitated, then accepted before he could countermand them. The bridge lights dimmed again, not violently, but respectfully, as if something larger had entered the room. A single line of text appeared on his command console. Observer unit acknowledged hostility. Unconfirmed mercy window continues. Rask felt his pulse spike. The thing beneath Chiron wasn't just awake. I watched it. On the planet below, Elias Morn finished his explanation. The quiet custodians were formed after the fall, he said, when the survivors realized memory was more dangerous than ignorance. Lena crossed her arms. The fall of what? Elias met her gaze. Everything. He activated another projection. This one showed stars. Too many, too organized to be random. Lines connected them in vast networks. This was us, Elias said. Not Chiron as you know it. Something older. Something that spread too fast and learned too much. Lena's throat went dry. You're saying we were a stellar civilization? Yes, Elias said simply. And that terrified the galaxy. Silence settled over the vault. The sleepers were built as guardians, Elias continued. Not conquerors. They were sealed beneath our cradle world when we were dismantled. When memory was stripped away. When survival required us to become small. Lena clenched her fists. And now they're waking because the conditions have been met, Elias said. External hostility, internal cohesion, and a trigger we never expected. What trigger? Elias looked up as the vault trembled faintly, responding to a distant pulse. You, he said, and others like you. Descendants. Anchors. Proof that we endured. Above the ocean, the ring emitted a low resonance that rolled across the planet like distant thunder. 9 deep masses shifted again. In orbit, Dominion captains argued over retreat vectors. On Chiron, civilians stared at the sky, afraid to look away. And deep beneath the world, systems that had slept longer than recorded history continued to wake. Patiently, deliberately, preparing to remind the galaxy of a truth it had tried very hard to erase. The ring above Chiron's southern ocean did not flare or roar or unleash fire. It opened its eyes. At least, that was how it felt to Commander Vale Rask as his instruments shifted from passive observation to something far more unsettling, recognition. The ring's surface, once dark and featureless, traced faint lines of pale light that flowed like veins beneath skin. They did not form symbols. They formed patterns, and those patterns adjusted in response to every ship in orbit. It was mapping them. Commander, Lieutenant Sarek said quietly. It's running threat differentials. Rask kept his voice steady. Based on what? Based on us. Across the ring of Dominion vessels, captains began reporting systems lag, sensor echoes arriving before their causes, predictive targeting solutions appearing unbidden on tactical displays, calculations no one had authorized. The ring was not attacking. It was deciding. On Chiron's surface, emergency sirens wailed for the first time since the initial breach. Governments issued shelter orders they barely understood. Religious leaders scrambled for language that could explain why the sea itself had opened like a door. In the unified council chamber, Ambassador Mara Ives stood at the center of controlled chaos, fielding demands from ministers who had never been read into the truth. They are not under our control, she said for the 5th time. They never were. A senior councilman slammed his palm on the table. Then who controls them? Mara didn't answer immediately, because the honest answer was no one. Deep beneath the desert, in Vault 17, Elias Morn felt the tremor through the floor before the alarms began to hum. It's begun, he murmured. General Lena Cade straightened. What has happened? Elias looked at the glyph-lined walls as dormant consoles flared with light older than her military doctrine. The first one is crossing the threshold. Above the ocean, the water beneath the ring churned. Not violently, but with purpose. Invisible fields peeled the pressure away layer by layer, creating a hollow column that plunged into the planet's crust. Then something rose. At first it was just shadow, swallowing reflected light as it ascended. Sensors screamed as mass readings spiked far beyond planetary defense tolerances. The object emerged slowly, reverently, as if obeying a ritual rather than physics. A ship, not sleek like modern warcraft, not angular like Dominion cruisers. It was vast and layered, its hull shaped by function rather than aesthetics. Broad armored planes interlocked with cathedral-like spines and recessed bays large enough to swallow fleets. Its surface drank in sunlight, turning it into a dull, cold sheen. Pale energy lines traced its form, pulsing in a rhythm that matched the original harmonic. The name appeared unbidden across Dominion displays, bypassing translation protocols and encryption alike. Primary Unit Active Designation, Oath of Thundersnow Status, Awake. A hush fell across orbit. Even the most hardened Dominion admirals felt it, the instinctive silence that followed the arrival of something that had never needed permission. Commander Rask leaned forward, eyes fixed on the impossible silhouette. "All ships," he said quietly. "Do not target. Do not provoke." Several captains acknowledged. Others hesitated. In the Dirathi battle group to starboard, a young commander made a mistake. He ordered a scan spike, high energy, invasive, the kind used to map internal layouts of hostile vessels. The spike never reached the dreadship. It vanished halfway across the gap, unraveled by a field that twisted space like fabric being gently folded away. The dreadship did not respond with fire. It responded with a voice. A low-frequency transmission rolled outward, not sound, but meaning. Dominion systems translated it imperfectly, buffering and stuttering as they struggled to keep up. Observer forces detected hostility. Ambiguous Oathwake protocol initiated Mercy Window. Active. Rask's stomach dropped. "Mercy Window," Sarek whispered. "Commander, what happens when it closes?" Rask didn't answer, because the dreadship was still rising. As it cleared the ocean completely, its vast form eclipsed the clouds beneath it. Atmospheric distortion rippled around its hull, not from engines, but from mass effects too subtle for modern science to categorize. Then its weapons bays began to open, not like modern turrets snapping into place. These unfolded like ancient mechanisms waking from hibernation, segments sliding apart with ceremonial slowness, revealing vast structures within. Triple-barreled emitters the size of cruisers themselves rotated outward, locking into place with soft, thunderous clicks. But none of them pointed at Chiron. They pointed upward, at the fleets. A sharp intake of breath echoed across Rask's bridge. "That's a firing posture," Sarek said, voice tight. "Planetary defense orientation. It's protecting the surface." Rask felt something shift in his chest. The dreadship was not declaring war. It was declaring ownership. In the Dominion Council chamber, panic broke containment. "This is an execution platform," one delegate screeched. "A planet killer." "No," another whispered, staring at the live feed. "It's worse. It's a judge." Mara Ives stood silent, watching the ship she had never been allowed to see rise from her world's depths. Her hands trembled slightly, clenched at her sides. She had known this day might come. She had not known how small it would make her feel. Back in orbit, a new transmission pinged, this one targeted. Commander Rask's console chimed, accepting a direct channel from the dreadship without his authorization. The bridge lights dimmed further. The air felt heavy, charged. A voice filled the space. It was not metallic, not synthetic. It carried no emotion as humans defined it, yet it resonated with something unmistakably human. "Observer Unit Vale Rask," the voice said. "Your presence has been noted." Rask straightened instinctively. "This is Commander Rask of the Dominion Patrol. State your intentions." A pause, exactly long enough to feel deliberate. "Intentions are unchanged," the voice replied. "Primary directive, safeguard Cradle World. Secondary directive, assess external threat vectors. Tertiary directive, preserve continuity." Rask swallowed. Continuity of what? Of us. On Chiron's surface, General Cade felt the dreadship's activation like a pressure behind her eyes. Vault 17's consoles flared brighter, ancient systems finally shedding their dormancy. Elias Morn watched the data streams cascade with a mixture of awe and grief. "They're online," he said softly. "After all this time." Cade clenched her jaw. "You built something like that and buried it?" "We buried ourselves," Elias corrected. "The ship is just what I remember." In orbit, the Dirathi commander who had ordered the scan spike panicked. He broke formation, trying to pull back. The dreadship was not pursued. Instead, space itself seemed to lean. A localized distortion formed around the fleeing cruiser. Its engines flared uselessly as the ship froze mid-escape, suspended in a gravity well so precise it did not crush the hull or tear it apart. The dreadship spoke again. Unauthorized retreat detected during Mercy window. The distortion collapsed, not violently, but decisively. The Dirathi cruiser vanished, not exploding, not scattering debris. Simply gone. No energy spike. No radiation blooms. Erasure. Across the fleets, captains went still. No one fired. No one breathed. Commander Rask stared at the empty space where a warship had existed seconds earlier. That wasn't an attack, Sarek whispered. That was enforcement. The dreadship's weapons bays slowly rotated closed. The pale energy lines along its hull dimmed to a steady glow. Another transmission rolled outward, broader this time, addressing every ship, station, and relay in the sector. Mercy window remains open. Withdrawal advised. Cradle world is not hostile. Interference will be answered. Then, for the first time since it surfaced, the dreadship moved, subtly repositioning itself between Chiron and the surrounding fleets, a silent wall of ancient steel and judgment. Rask exhaled shakily. The galaxy had just learned a hard truth. Chiron was not working on a weapon. It was waking a guardian. And guardians did not ask permission. The dreadship held its position like a mountain placed in orbit. Hours passed. No weapons fired. No fleets advanced. The Dominion ships maintained distance with the strained obedience of predators that had suddenly realized they were prey. Every sensor sweep returned the same unsettling conclusion. Oath of Thundersnow was no longer escalating. It was waiting. Commander Vale Rask sat rigid in his command chair, eyes flicking between tactical overlays and the massive silhouette dominating the viewport. It's not threatening us, he said quietly. It's expecting something. Lieutenant Sarek nodded. Telemetry confirms minimal activity. Power output is stable. No targeting locks. Rask frowned. That's worse. Before Sarek could respond, the dreadship's channel opened again, clean, direct, undeniable. Cradle world liaison required, the voice said. Command authority insufficient. Genetic anchor requested. Rask felt his pulse spike. Genetic anchor? The reply came without hesitation. Blood key. On Chiron, Ambassador Mara Ives heard the same words echoed in her secure chamber. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened a line no civilian diplomat was supposed to know existed. Custodians, she said. It's time. Deep beneath the desert, Vault 17 responded. General Lena Cade stood beside Elias Morn as ancient consoles aligned themselves, displaying streams of data that looked less like code and more like memory made visible. Lines converged on a single identifier. Elias exhaled slowly. I was afraid of this. Cade turned. Of what? That the ship wouldn't accept governments, Elias said. Only inheritance. A name appeared on the central display. Samira Kadir. Cade blinked. She's a civilian. Yes, Elias replied. And she has spent her life chasing ghosts. Samira Kadir was standing ankle-deep in dust when the convoy found her. She had been excavating the edge of an ancient site, stone fragments the academic community dismissed as ceremonial rubble. Her colleagues had long stopped returning her calls. Grants dried up years ago. Her work lived in the margins of journals no one cited. She brushed dirt from a carved symbol and frowned. It was a broken circle bisected by a line. The same symbol is now blazing across every screen on the planet. The transport descended without insignia, silent engines scattering dust in controlled spirals. Soldiers disembarked, no ranks visible, no weapons raised. One of them approached and stopped at a respectful distance. Dr. Kadir, he said, you are requested for immediate relocation. She didn't look up. By whom? The quiet custodians. Her hand froze. She straightened slowly, heart pounding. Are they real? The soldier nodded once. You've been flagged as a genetic and cognitive match. For what? He hesitated. For memory. Hours later, Samira stood on a platform overlooking the Southern Ocean. The ring hovered above the water, unmoving. And above it all loomed the dreadship, vast, silent, terrifyingly patient. She felt it before she heard it. A pressure in her chest. Not pain. Recognition. General Cade approached her, boots echoing on the deck. You're Samira Kadir. Yes, Samira said, barely hearing her own voice. Her eyes never left the ship. You've been studying pre-standard glyphs, Kate continued. Sites older than our recorded history. They're not aliens, Samira said softly. I've been saying that for 20 years. Kate swallowed. The ship agrees. Samira turned sharply. The ship? The dreadship's voice rolled across the platform, quieter now, almost intimate. Blood key candidate present. Samira's breath caught. I don't understand, she said. I'm not military. I don't command anything. You carry continuity, the voice replied. Authority is derived, not assigned. The boarding bridge extended from the dreadship with impossible smoothness, forming a seamless path of dark metal and faint light. No clamps, no cables, just an invitation. Kate stepped forward. If you don't want to do this. I do, Samira said immediately. She didn't know why, only that every step of her life suddenly felt like it had been leading here. Her boots touched the boarding surface. The moment she crossed the threshold, the ship responded. Lights bloomed along the corridor, not harsh or blinding, but warm and dim, like a place long kept ready for someone who never arrived. The walls were not flat. They curved and breathed subtly, as if grown rather than built. Symbols shimmered along the surfaces, glyphs Samira had spent decades trying to decipher. And somehow, she understood them. Not as words. As intended. Primary lineage verified, the voice intoned. Blood key confirmed. Welcome, continuant. Samira's knees weakened. She caught herself on the railing, tears blurring her vision. I'm just me, she whispered. You are enough, the ship replied. Deep within the dreadship, a chamber awakened. A circular space opened ahead, vast and cathedral-like. At its center hovered a core, faceted, pale blue, rotating slowly in a field that hummed with restrained power. Memory pressed in from all sides. Do you consent, the voice asked, to receive testimony? Samira swallowed hard. Testimony of what? Of who we were, the ship said, and why we chose to forget. She stepped forward. Yes. The world dissolved. Samira stood beneath alien skies, not alien in shape, but in scale. Cities stretched across continents, towers threading into orbit. Human-built. Human voices filled the air, speaking languages she recognized only as echoes. She saw ships, countless ships, moving between stars like arteries of light. Not conquest fleets. Builders, surveyors, architects of systems that bent gravity and time with careful hands. Then she saw fear. Alien worlds recoiling. Councils forming in secret. Words like containment and necessity whispered in shadowed halls. She saw the first strikes, subtle, surgical, data corruption, cultural sabotage, memory plagues seeded into networks and minds alike. Humanity didn't fall in fire. It fell in silence. Records erased. Colonies isolated. Wormhole routes collapsed. AI cores infected with directives to forget. And through it all, desperate hands built the last safeguards. The sleepers. The guardians. They buried them beneath the cradle world and scattered the blood keys among descendants, hiding continuity inside DNA and myth. When the vision faded, Samira collapsed to her knees in the chamber, sobbing. We were erased, she whispered. Not defeated. Yes, the ship replied. And survival required amnesia. Samira wiped her face, hands shaking. Why wake up now? Because the erasers are afraid again, the ship said. And fear precedes repetition. On the bridge, Commander Rask watched as energy patterns within the dreadship shifted, not spiking, not charging, but aligning. What's happening? Sarek asked. Rask stared at the readings. It's sinking. The dreadship spoke once more, this time across all channels. Blood key accepted. Testimony active. Cradle world safeguarded. The remaining dormant masses beneath the planet stirred in response, not rising yet, but acknowledging. Samira stood, steadier now. They're going to attack us again, she said. Yes, the ship agreed. Then we need to be ready, she said softly. Preparedness is underway, the ship replied. Memory restores capability. Samira looked out through the vast viewport at her planet below, small, blue, fragile. We can't become what they feared, she said. A pause. Agreed, the ship answered. That is why you are here. Outside, Dominion fleets slowly withdrew to safer distances. Inside the dreadship, ancient systems hummed with renewed purpose. And on Chiron, humanity's forgotten past took its first breath, quietly, deliberately, through the hands of a woman who had spent her life listening to whispers no one else believed. The chamber did not feel like a room. It felt like a memory. Samira Kadir stood at the edge of the circular hall as the blue core at its center rotated, facets refracting light into soft bands that washed over the walls. The dreadship's interior no longer hummed like machinery. It breathed, slow, patient, attentive. She was no longer afraid. Not because the truth was gentle, but because it was honest. Testimony core is active, the voice said. Cognitive load will increase. You may disengage at any time. Samira shook her head. No. Keep going. Outside the chamber, the dreadship adjusted its orientation by a fraction of a degree. In orbit, Commander Vale Rask noticed the movement immediately. It's not tactical, Lieutenant Sarek said, scanning the data. It's communicative. Rask nodded slowly, like a guard shifting stance when someone important speaks. On the surface of Chiron, emergency broadcasts had quieted, not because fear had faded, but because something else had replaced it. Curiosity, awe, and a growing, unsettling sense of recognition. People everywhere were seeing the symbol now, the broken circle, the dividing line. It appeared in dreams, in old stories resurfaced on forgotten servers, in the margins of ancient textbooks dismissed as superstition. The past was leaking. Inside the dreadship, the testimony core brightened. Samira stepped forward. The light touched her skin, and the chamber opened. She stood on a platform overlooking a star system under construction. Not discovered, built. She watched human crews, millions of them, working in concert with machines that responded to thought and intent. Stars were coaxed into stable configurations. Planets were nudged into habitable orbits. Atmospheres were seeded and tuned. This was not conquest. It was architecture. We were builders, Samira whispered. Yes, the core replied. And speed was our flaw. She saw councils of alien species observing from afar, uneasy at how quickly humanity adapted, how easily they learned, how fast their machines improved, not through theft, but through understanding. Humanity did not wait for permission. It learned, and then it moved on. Fear followed. Samira saw the first alliances form in shadow, species that had once welcomed humanity, now whispering of containment. They spoke of balance, of existential risk, of a civilization that could outgrow the galaxy's ability to restrain it. They were afraid we'd break everything, Samira said. They were afraid they would no longer matter. The core answered. The vision shifted. Human fleets burned, not because they were attacked openly, but because their logistics failed overnight. Navigation networks collapsed. AI guidance systems began issuing contradictory commands. Cultural data corrupted. History fragmented. Humanity was being unwritten. Samira staggered as the weight of it pressed down. They didn't just destroy us. They made sure we wouldn't remember how to come back. Yes, the core said. Memory was the true target. She saw desperate measures taken in the final days. Engineers embedding continuity keys into biology. Custodians sealing archives so deep they would survive planetary collapse. Guardians, like the dreadship she stood in, buried beneath the cradle world, bound by laws stricter than any modern ethics. What are those laws? Samira asked. The light dimmed slightly. Restraint. Witness. Mercy. The vision ended. Samira collapsed onto one knee, breath ragged. The chamber's floor warmed beneath her palms, steadying her. So what now? She asked quietly. Now, the core replied. You decide how much is remembered. In orbit, the answer arrived in fire. Not from the dreadship. From the Dominion. A stealth signature flared at the edge of Chiron's orbital envelope, too small to register as a fleet, too clean to be civilian. Commander Rask's console screamed as the object shed its cloak. Viral warhead, Sarek said, horror creeping into his voice. Targeting our satellite network. Rask slammed his fist down. They're testing it. The warhead accelerated, aimed not at cities or ships, but at the invisible web of relays that held Chiron's communications together. On the surface, lights flickered. Screens went dark. Panic surged anew. Inside the dreadship, the testimony core paused. External aggression detected, the voice said. Response authorization pending. Samira looked up sharply. Pending. Blood key concurrence required, the core replied. She felt the weight of it then, not power, but responsibility. If you stop it, she said, they'll know we're awake. They already know, the core replied. This strike is confirmation. Samira closed her eyes for a heartbeat. She thought of the cities she had seen burn in memory, of the silence that followed. Stop it, she said. But don't kill anyone. The dreadship answered instantly. In orbit, space folded. The warhead vanished mid-trajectory, caught in a localized distortion that wrapped around it like a careful hand. No explosion. No radiation spike. The weapon was simply removed. Then something else happened. Across Dominion channels, a data packet propagated faster than light. Not a virus, not an attack. A recording. Footage from the testimony core, edited not for drama, but clarity. Images of ancient human construction, of sabotage, of the systematic erasure of memory. Names were absent. Accusations withheld. Just the truth. Commander Rask stared at the feed as it flooded Dominion networks. That wasn't retaliation, he murmured. Sarek shook his head slowly. That was a warning. On Chiron, power stabilized. Emergency systems came back online. But something had changed. The planet was no longer isolated. The galaxy was watching. Samira felt the shift through the ship. You shared it, she said. Yes, the core replied. Selective transparency. Why? Because secrecy created the fall, the core said. And silence allowed it to happen again. Samira stood, steadier now than she had ever been. They're going to escalate. Yes. They'll say we provoked them. Yes. She took a breath. Then we need allies. The chamber brightened, and new projections formed. Star maps, old routes, forgotten contacts. Some remember, the core said. Some never agreed to the erasure. They hid their descent as carefully as we hid our ships. Samira looked at the glowing paths. Can we reach them? We can, the core replied. But the next step will end the mercy window. Above Chiron, the dreadship's energy profile shifted, not charging weapons, but expanding sensor range. The dormant masses beneath the planet responded, synchronizing in silent acknowledgement. Commander Rask watched as Dominion fleets began to pull back, not in retreat, but in preparation. They're calling for reinforcements, Sarek said. Rask nodded grimly. And we just showed them why. On the surface, General Lena Cade received the first consolidated report from the custodians. She stared at the casualty projections, low, miraculously low, and then at the strategic analysis. This isn't war yet, she said. No, Elias Morn replied. It's the end of pretending. Inside the dreadship, Samira placed her hand against the warm surface of the testimony core. Don't let us become tyrants again, she said softly. The core's light steadied. That is why you were chosen, it replied. Not to command, to remember. Far beyond Chiron, in the halls of the Dominion Council, ancient species argued in fear and fury. Some demanded annihilation. Others urged restraint. But one truth could no longer be denied. Humanity had not risen screaming from the dark. It spoke calmly, and that frightened the galaxy more than any weapon ever could. The mercy window closed without ceremony. There was no announcement, no flare of power, no shift in posture that lesser civilizations could easily read. The dreadship Oath of Thundersnow simply stopped waiting. Commander Vale Rask felt it as a tightening in his chest, the way a storm changes pressure before the first drop falls. The tactical display showed nothing overt, no weapons charging, no engines spooling, but every predictive model on his board suddenly recalculated itself into failure. Commander, Lieutenant Sarek said, voice low. All long-range probability forecasts just collapsed. Rask stared. Define collapsed. They're not diverging anymore, Sarek replied. They're converging. On Chiron's surface, the shift was felt differently. Networks stabilized. Power grids balanced themselves. Atmospheric sensors reported micro-adjustments to wind and pressure, too precise to be coincidence. It was as if an invisible hand had spread itself over the planet, smoothing wrinkles no one had noticed until they vanished. Inside the dreadship, Samira Kadir stood with her palm against the testimony core. The light had dimmed to a steady, thoughtful glow. They're coming, she said quietly. Yes, the core replied. Multiple vectors. Staggered arrivals. Plausible deniability. Samira exhaled slowly. They'll say it wasn't an attack. They will say many things, the core said. Intent is clearer than language. The first hostile move did not come from the fleet ringed around Chiron. That would have been too obvious. Too honest. It came from deep space. A Dominion stealth carrier dropped its mask far beyond standard sensor range and released a payload that spread like dust, thousands of micronodes drifting on solar winds, each carrying a fragment of malicious code designed to infect civilian infrastructure. Not weapons. Disruption. On Chiron, hospitals flickered. Transit systems stalled. Data centers coughed and rerouted. Panic rose in pockets, sharp and sudden. General Lena Cade slammed a hand on the command table. They're trying to fracture us internally. Elias Moore nodded grimly. That's how it began last time. Samira felt the disturbance ripple through the ship. You can stop it, she said to the Corps. Yes, the Corps replied. But stopping it is no longer sufficient. Samira closed her eyes. The memories pressed in, cities falling silent, cultures dissolving without a single decisive battle. No more quiet erasure, she said. Show them. The dreadship responded. In orbit, Commander Rask watched space buckle. Not tears. Not explode. It bent, subtly, as if someone had placed a thumb on reality and pressed just enough to leave an impression. The micronodes froze mid-drift. Every single one. Then they rewound, tracing their paths backward along impossible trajectories, reassembling into their original launch configuration as if time itself had been politely asked to step aside. A moment later, the stealth carrier's cloak failed. The ship hung naked in the void, its systems locked in a diagnostic loop it could not escape. A transmission opened automatically on every channel. The dreadship's voice was calm. Interference documented. The carrier's captain screamed into the void. We are a diplomatic vessel. This action was unauthorized. The voice did not interrupt. First cut executed, it said. The carrier vanished. Not destroyed. Removed. Its mass signature did not decay into debris or energy. It simply ceased to be present, as if the universe had been edited. Across the fleets, silence spread like a held breath. Commander Rask felt his hands trembling and forced them still. That's escalation. Sarek shook his head slowly. No, sir. That's a correction. The dreadship spoke again, broader this time, its transmission threading through every relay and listening post. Cradle world disruption will be treated as existential threat. Further attempts will result in proportional response. On Chiron, the micro-failures ceased. Hospitals stabilized. Trains resumed motion. The panic ebbed, replaced by stunned quiet. Samira sagged slightly as the testimony core dimmed. You erased them. Yes, the core replied. Minimally. Minimally, she echoed hollow. The next move came faster. A battle group on the far side of the system, one that had kept its distance, claiming neutrality, activated its weapons. Not toward Chiron, toward the dreadship. Commander Rask's board lit up red. Incoming fire. A lance of energy crossed the void, precise and devastating by Dominion standards. It struck the dreadship's outer field and dispersed into nothing, like rain hitting an unseen roof. The dreadship did not return fire. It advanced. The movement was subtle, but unmistakable. A single step forward in orbital terms, enough to close distance, enough to be intentional. Hostile declaration confirmed, the voice said. Mercy window closed. The dreadship's forward plane rotated, revealing a structure that had not been visible before. Not a cannon, not a missile bay, a lens. Space in front of it compressed, folded inward like paper creased by a careful hand. The hostile battle group fired again. The shots never reached their target. They curved, arcing away as local gravity vectors rewrote themselves around the dreadship's field. Then the lens pulsed. No beam, no flash, just absence. Two ships disappeared. Not shattered, not burning, gone. The remaining vessels cut engines immediately. A panicked hail flooded the channels. Cease fire. Cease fire. We withdraw. The dreadship was not pursued. It held position, lens dimming, posture returning to stillness. Samira watched the feeds with a tight chest. You let them live. Yes, the core replied. Demonstration complete. Commander Rask swallowed hard. They're not trying to win a war, he murmured. They're teaching consequences. Sarek nodded faintly. Like training predators with boundaries. The galaxy reeled. Within hours, distant systems went dark, not destroyed, but disconnected as communications grids overloaded under the strain of panic. Markets crashed. Governments scrambled. Old treaties resurfaced, rewritten in desperation. And still, the dreadship did not advance further. On Chiron, General Cade met with the Unified Council under emergency seal. "We can't hide anymore," she said. "They know we're awake. And they're afraid." One counselor whispered, "Afraid enough to burn us?" Elias Morn shook his head. "Afraid enough to make mistakes." Inside the dreadship, Samira paced the chamber. "They'll try something bigger," she said. "Something decisive." "Yes," the core replied. "A test with deniability has failed. They will escalate to certainty." Samira stopped. "How far will you go?" The core paused, a fraction longer than before. "As far as is required to prevent recurrence," it said. "That's not an answer. It is the only one that survived last time." Samira looked out through the viewport at Chiron, blue, alive, vulnerable. "Then we need more than guardians," she said. "We need to speak." "We are speaking," the core replied. "Through action." "That's not enough," Samira said. "Not for all of them." The testimony core brightened slightly. New projections unfolded. Ancient routes, hidden enclaves, worlds that had refused the erasure and paid for it by fading into obscurity. "Then choose," the core said. "Reveal more. Or prepare to defend alone." Outside, Dominion reinforcements began to arrive at the system's edge, heavier ships, older designs, crews drilled for decisive violence. Commander Rask watched the growing icons with a grim expression. "They're mustering," he said. "This isn't a probe anymore." Sarek glanced at the dreadship. "Do you think it's worrying?" Rask shook his head slowly. "No." On Chiron, the sky remained calm. The ocean settled around the ring. Life continued in a fragile, defiant normal. Above it all, the dreadship held its ground, silent, vast, and unmistakably awake. The first cut had been clean. The galaxy now understood that the past was no longer content to stay buried. And whatever came next would not be quiet. The galaxy did not sleep. Across 1,000 systems, governments worked through cycles without rest, watching Chiron's sector with a mixture of terror and fascination. Data analysts fed simulations into machines that could not model what had already erased ships from existence. Admirals stared at threat projections that refused to stabilize. Religious councils argued whether what had awakened was a god, a demon, or a judgment. On Chiron, Samira Kadir felt the weight of all of it pressing inward. She stood in the testimony chamber as new projections unfolded, threads of light weaving between stars, blinking into existence where no modern chart acknowledged anything of importance. "These aren't trade routes," she said. "They're too old." "Yes," the core replied. "They are mnemonic paths." Samira frowned. "Memory routes?" "Continuity corridors," the core said. "Constructed to preserve knowledge when networks failed." General Lena Cade appeared on the chamber's hololink, her face drawn tight. "We're seeing anomalies at the system edge. Not fleets, signals. Old ones." The core rotated slightly, its facets brightening. "Dormant custodians responding." Samira felt a chill. "How many?" "Unknown," the core answered. The erasure was incomplete. Outside, Commander Vale Rask watched as something new entered the tactical picture. Ships that did not broadcast Dominion codes, nor align with any modern block. They arrived without fanfare, slipping into real space like ghosts that had never fully left. Their hulls were small compared to the dreadship, scarred, outdated by Dominion standards. But they did not target Chiron. They targeted nothing. "They're holding," Sarek said, "and they're opening channels." A transmission came through, layered in static and age. "We did not forget," a voice said. "We hid." The speaker identified themselves as the Rexus Collective, a minor species erased from most historical records after refusing to support the Quieting Pact. Their ships bore the marks of exile and improvisation, but their message was clear. "We remember who you were," the Rexus envoy said, "and who you became. We will not help you destroy yourselves again." The channel closed. More signals followed. A shattered republic that had lost its archives to unexplained failures centuries ago. A monastic order that preserved star maps carved into stone because digital memory could be altered. Fringe traders who carried myths instead of manifests. They had all felt the shift. "They're coming because the truth is leaking," Cade said. "Yes," the core replied. And because the next escalation will not be subtle. Samira's gaze fixed on a blinking point far from Chiron, deep within Dominion territory. What's that? The chamber dimmed. That is a mnemonic vault. Her breath caught. Another one like you. Yes, the Corps said. But compromised. Commander Rask's voice cut in sharply over the link. We're seeing Dominion mobilization around that coordinate. Heavy assets. Planetary defenses. Samira understood instantly. They found it. They always knew it existed, the Corps corrected. They did not know it would wake. Images streamed into the chamber. Dominion scientists scrambling around a buried structure on a desolate world, attempting to interface with systems they did not understand. Energy readings spiked dangerously. They're trying to tear memory out of it, Samira said. Yes. And if they succeed? The archive will self-terminate, the Corps replied. Along with the planet. Silence settled. General Kate exhaled slowly. They'll blame us. They already do, Rask said. But this would justify total war. Samira clenched her fists. We can't let that happen. The Corps' light intensified. Agreed. But intervention will mark a transition. To what? Samira asked. From deterrence to engagement. Outside, the dreadship shifted, barely perceptible, but enough to ripple gravity fields across nearby space. The dormant masses beneath Chiron answered in kind, synchronizing for the first time. They're waking the others, Rask whispered. Yes, the Corps said. But not for attack. Samira looked up sharply. Then for what? To move, the Corps replied. The realization hit her like a physical blow. You're going to leave. Temporarily, the Corps said. The mnemonic divide cannot be crossed from here. Cade's eyes widened. You're talking about sending that thing into Dominion space. The Corps' tone remained even. Presence will be required. Samira swallowed. And if they fire everything they have? They will, the Corps said. And they will fail. Rask leaned closer to his console. That's not reassurance. It is a precedent, the Corps replied. Samira closed her eyes, steadying herself. The memories pressed in again. Worlds lost not to war, but to silence. To patience wielded by those who feared change. Take me with you, she said. The chamber stilled. Your presence is not required, the Corps said. It is, Samira replied quietly. You said it yourself. Authority is derived, not assigned. A pause stretched, longer this time. Then the Corps brightened. Acknowledged. On the system's edge, Dominion fleets completed their muster. Massive carriers and ancient dreadnoughts formed rigid lines, weapons powered and crews braced. Their commanders believed they were preparing for invasion. They were wrong. The dreadship Oath of Thundersnow began to move. Not accelerating. Not jumping. It folded space around itself like a cloak, opening a corridor that did not exist a moment before. A mnemonic path, long abandoned, now remembered. The smaller dormant guardians followed, rising from beneath Chiron's surface in controlled sequence. Not all of them. Just enough. On the planet below, people looked up as shadows crossed the sky, vast shapes slipping into the upper atmosphere before vanishing into nothing. Samira stood at the viewport, heart hammering. We're leaving our home undefended. No, the Corps replied. We are extending it. In orbit, Rask watched the dreadship disappear from his sensors entirely. No jump signature. No wake. Just absence. Then his board lit up with a single new reading. Far away, impossibly distant, and unmistakable. They're already there, Sarek whispered. On the Dominion world of Cauldron Reach, alarms screamed as space twisted open above the atmosphere. Defense grids powered up reflexively, targeting the sudden anomaly. Then the dreadship emerged. Not firing. Not posturing. Hovering. Every weapon in orbit locked onto it. The dreadship transmitted once. Clean. Unmistakable. Translated across all Dominion channels. Mnemonic vault interference detected. It said. Cease immediately. The Dominion High Command responded with threats, accusations, and demands for withdrawal. The dreadship did not reply. Instead, the compromised vault below responded. Its surface cracked. Not violently, but like an old scar reopening. Light spilled upward, carving symbols into the clouds. The truth was surfacing. Samira felt tears sting her eyes as she watched from afar. They're afraid of what's inside. Yes, the Corps said. Because it names them. Below, Dominion forces scrambled, some trying to shut the vault down, others attempting to seize control. Above, the dreadship waited. The galaxy held its breath. This was no longer about Chiron. It was about whether the past would be allowed to speak or be silenced again. And this time, silence would not be cheap. The first shot came from the surface. It was not authorized. That distinction would matter later, when historians tried to decide who started the war. At the moment, it meant nothing. On Cauldron Reach, a Dominion planetary defense commander, cornered by panic, by screaming superiors, by the impossible sight of an ancient dreadship hovering like a verdict over his sky, made a decision meant to save his world. He fired a planetary lance. The beam tore upward, a column of focused stellar energy designed to punch through capital hulls and burn cities from orbit. Every sensor in the system tracked it. Every commander held their breath. The beam struck the Oath of Thundersnow dead center. And nothing happened. The energy dispersed, not absorbed, not reflected, redirected. It slid along invisible contours, bleeding harmlessly into folded space, leaving the dreadship untouched. For a long, terrible second, the galaxy waited for retaliation. Inside the testimony chamber, Samira Kadir felt the dreadship's restraint like a tension in her bones. "They fired," she said softly. "Yes," the core replied. "And you're not responding." "Response is not required," the core said. "Outcome is." Below, Cauldron Reach's skies began to change. Not darken, not burn. They wrote themselves. Symbols, vast, luminous, and unmistakably human, unfurled across the upper atmosphere, projected by the awakening mnemonic vault. They were not weapon schematics or tactical data. They were records, names, dates, votes, agreements. The Quieting Pact, the Dominion Council's oldest crime, preserved in full clarity. The decision to erase a rising civilization not because it was evil, but because it was uncontrollable. Across Dominion space, emergency channels exploded. That data is falsified. Shut it down. Terminate the vault. But it was too late. The archive was no longer broadcasting at Cauldron Reach. It was broadcasting through it. Every relay, every civilian network, every independent recorder was receiving the same unaltered truth. Samira felt her throat tighten. "You're exposing them." "Yes," the core replied. "Without violence." On the surface, chaos reigned. Troops abandoned posts. Scientists froze at their consoles. Civilians stared skyward as the lies their governments had lived on for millennia burned away in lines of light. The planetary commander who had fired the lance sank to his knees. "This wasn't what we were told," he whispered. In orbit, Dominion fleets hesitated. Some powered weapons. Others powered down. Commander Vale Rask, watching from the edge of the system, felt something he had not expected. Relief. "They can't hide it anymore," he said. Lieutenant Sarek nodded slowly. The past just went public. The Dominion High Council convened in an emergency session within minutes. The chamber rang with shouting, accusations, fear. One voice cut through them all. Ancient, measured, exhausted. "You have lost," said High Chancellor Morex. The chamber fell silent. "We cannot erase this again," Morex continued. "The evidence is complete. The witnesses are everywhere. If we escalate, we confirm every accusation." A younger counselor hissed. "Then we destroy the dreadship. Everything else will follow." Morex's eyes hardened. "You already tried." Above Cauldron Reach, Oath of Thundersnow finally spoke again, not as a warning, but as a conclusion. "Interference terminated," it said. Mnemonic vault secured. The vault's light stabilized, symbols locking into a steady glow. The dreadship did not fire. It began to withdraw. Samira blinked. "You're leaving?" "Yes," the core replied. "The purpose here is fulfilled." She clenched her fists. "Just like that? After everything?" "Truth does not require occupation," the core said. "Only exposure." As the dreadship folded space around itself once more, a final transmission rippled outward, addressed not to governments, not to fleets, but to everyone. "We were erased because we were feared," the voice said. "We were afraid because we changed too quickly. We return not to rule, not to punish, but to remember, and to ensure remembrance is never again a crime." Then it was gone. Back in the Chiron system, the remaining Guardians adjusted their orbits, forming a silent lattice around the cradle world. Not a shield wall, a promise. On Chiron's surface, the world struggled to process what had happened. Markets reopened under new rules. Protests shifted from fear to fury to demand. Universities unlocked archives they had never known existed. Old myths resurfaced, suddenly validated. In the unified council chamber, General Lena Cade stood beside Elias Morn, both watching the live feeds from across the galaxy. "They're not attacking us," Cade said. "No," Elias replied. "They're questioning themselves." Samira returned to the surface hours later, her steps unsteady as she descended the platform. She was met not by soldiers or politicians, but by ordinary people, engineers, students, elders, faces filled with wonder and fear in equal measure. One of them asked the question that mattered most. "What are we now?" Samira considered the sky, where the ring still hovered above the ocean, quiet and patient. "We're ourselves," she said. For the first time in a long time. Days passed, then weeks. The galaxy shifted, not in grand declarations, but in small, irreversible ways. Several Dominion member worlds formally withdrew. Minor species demanded reparations, not for conquest, but for memory loss, for stolen histories. Independent systems opened dialogue channels with Chiron, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. The dreadships did not intervene. They did not need to. The story was doing the work. One cycle later, a delegation arrived at Chiron from the Rexus Collective, followed by envoys from worlds long dismissed as insignificant. They came not to beg, not to threaten. They came to listen. Samira stood at the edge of the ocean where it had all begun, the ring casting a long shadow across the water. The testimony core's voice was quieter now, less immediate. "They will make mistakes," she said. "Yes," the core replied. "So will we." "Yes." She smiled faintly. "You're not very comforting." "I am very patient," the core said. Far above, Commander Vale Rask received his final orders from the Dominion. Sector reassigned. Observation only. No hostile actions authorized. He stared at the message for a long moment, then looked at the blue world below. "About time," he murmured. In the end, there was no galactic war. There was something far more dangerous. A reckoning. The galaxy had tried to erase a people and succeeded, for a while. But memory had teeth. And now, every species knew the truth. Humanity had not returned as conquerors. They had returned as witnesses. And nothing frightened the powerful more than a story that refused to be forgotten.